Hello everyone. Today I will be taking up 4th semester DSC 253 Measurement and Evaluation in Education Unit 4. So this paper has 3 credit, 100 full mark with 70 external and 30 internal marks. The objectives of the paper are to develop understanding of the measurement and evaluation in the field of education, to acquaint with different types of tests and their administration and uses, to acquaint with the principles of test construction, both educational and psychological, to get acquainted with different evaluation procedures and examination reforms. So at the end of the lessons, you will be able to define psychological tests, mention different types of psychological tests, understand principles of psychological tests, and illustrates process of psychological tests. So let's see what is psychological test. Psychological test is a standardized instrument used to measure various aspects of human behavior, intelligence, emotions, and personality. Understanding psychological tests is vital in fields like education, clinical psychology, and organizational settings as they help assess mental processes and patterns. Let's look into the definitions of psychological tests. Psychological tests are scientifically developed tools designed to systematically measure psychological attributes such as intelligence, personality, aptitude, interest, and emotions. The core aim is to obtain valid and reliable information about individual for various purposes like diagnosis, selection, assessment, and research. Keeping in mind this definition of psychological tests, let us check out some of its types. So what are the types of psychological tests? So let's look into the types of psychological tests. The first one is intelligence test. The second one is personality test. The third one is aptitude test, interest inventory. Aptitude test. Aptitude tests, achievement tests, neuropsychological tests. And projective tests. There are different types of psychological tests, each serving a unique function. The major types are classified based on their purpose and administration method. Knowing this helps in selecting the right test for a specific need, such as intelligence test measures cognitive abilities and problem-solving skills. Personality test assesses patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Aptitude test evaluates specific talents or potential for certain skills. Interest inventories reveal individual preferences and motivational sources. Achievement tests judge the knowledge and proficiency in a particular area. Then next, neuropsychological test assesses brain function, memory, and attention. And projective tests explore subconscious feelings and motives. Example, Rorschach test In as much as you know the types of psychological tests, it is important to know the principles of psychological testings, because effective psychological tests must meet important psychometric standards to ensure trustworthiness. So the core principles include standardization, reliability, validity, objectivity, and norms. Principles of What are the principles of psychological testings? Standardization, reliability, validity, norms. Standardization, reliability, validity, objectivity, norms. Objectives, norms. Standardization means consistent administration and scoring procedures for all test takers. Reliability talks about producing consistent results over repeated trials. Validity is to determine the degree to which the test measures what it claims to assess. Objectivity takes care of scoring that is unaffected by evaluator bias, and norms determines reference scores based on a large population for interpretation. So now we come into the important part, that is, how can you undertake psychological tests? So what are the processes of psychological testings? Now let's look into the process of psychological tests. How can you administer psychological tests on an individual process? First of all, you have to clearly define the purpose. Second one is select appropriate test, like what do you want to test? Is it aptitude? Is it interest? Is it personality? Then you have to prepare accordingly. Prepare after you identify what type of test you're going to do with. So you have to prepare the test materials, and then only you can administer. Then after administering, scoring is important. Very, very important. Scoring, then interpretation of the results. Interpretation of results, then after that you have to communicate as to what score or like what status an individual has scored. You have to communicate it to the individual. The psychological test process involves several steps to ensure scientific accuracy and meaningful results. So clearly define the purpose of testing, such as diagnosis or assessment. Secondly, select an appropriate psychological test based on the specific requirement. Then prepare test materials and brief the examinee about the procedures. Then administer the test under controlled and standardized conditions. Then comes scoring the test results. So scores can be tested under the prescribed keys or testing strategies. Then interpret the results by using established norms or criteria. Then communicate outcomes and recommendations to the concerned persons. let's see what are some of the psychological test example. There are many widely accepted psychological test examples. These have significant real-world utility in education, healthcare, and the workplace. Intelligence tests, for example, Stanford Binet Intelligence Scales, Welch's Adult Intelligence Scales, WAIS, personality tests, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MPI, Big Five personality tests, projective tests like Rorschach-Inkblot test, thematic perception test, TAT, or aptitude test like differential aptitude test, we call it as DAT, then achievement test like SAT, or academic objective test like internal tests, external examinations. All these are nothing but the achievement test. So with this, we wind up here for today. Take down some of the questions. What is psychological testing? Write down the characteristics of psychological testings. What are the process of psychological testing? Then write down some of the examples of psychological testing. So with this, we wind up here for today. All the best. Bye-bye.